Hello and welcome, fellow Hearthstonians. I'm PolishKing, and you're watching Deck Dissection, Episode 2. Before we get to the thick of things, I want to take a moment and thank you guys for making our first episode such a smash success. Without your positive energy and feedback, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, so thank you for being such an awesome community. Now, let's talk about a very exciting time in Hearthstone. This is finally our first live season. We've had many test seasons that has showed us plenty of results, and now we're finally moving on to our first official season of Hearthstone. This is awesome. Can't wait for it. Can't wait to get my legend backs, and I know you can't wait to get yours. So, as we've seen with all the other previous seasons, usually when seasons restart, there is a shift in the metagame towards aggressive decks. What that means for us is we really want to play decks that have good matchups versus these aggressive decks without committing too many cards towards them, so that we can also beat the other control decks that are trying to take out these aggressive decks. Now, you're asking yourself, what could possibly be the deck to do this? Or you just looked at the title. Well, it is Ancient Watcher Druid. This deck gives you the tools to beat aggro in a nifty little Ancient Watcher package, while subsequently giving you other pieces that help you greatly combat other control decks. This is really the 50-50 deck of the format. And I say 50-50 because you're never really a dog to any other deck, and you can always pull yourself out of situations. Alright, so let's take a look at the deck. So the deck list itself is pretty standard. Ancient Watcher Druid is fairly well known throughout the metagame, and it's been around for a couple of seasons as a big contender. And it gets a lot of people to Legendary. It's really good at grinding ladder because your Warlock matchup against aggressive Warlocks is very good, as well as your control matchup versus, let's say, another Druid or maybe a control Shaman. It's also very, very good because you have cards that shore up all these matchups, and they work in tandem with each other to be effective and are never really dead cards. So let's take a look why. Okay, Innervate. This card makes every matchup so good. You never mulligan your Innervates. I love to keep them in my hand. Nothing is more effective than a turn 2 Chillwind Yeti. It's just such a durable threat, and when you play it off turn so early, it really throws off their game, and it can give you the tempo advantage alone to just win. You know, oftentimes games are decided with this combination by turn 4 or 5, just because you've put so much pressure on them early and they haven't developed their board at all, that when we get into the real strength of the Druid deck, which is the mid game, you just take over and they have no chance of coming back. So you have cards like Wrath, which are extremely versatile and, you know, either cantrip themselves by drawing you a card and dealing 1 damage, or take out early creature threats, so it really shores up our early game. You know the Ancient Watcher packages here, which is Ancient Watcher, Sun Fury Protector, and Defender of Argus. So you're going to play the full suite of taunt creatures because you really want to exploit your Ancient Watchers. But a little known secret that not many people perform is the Keeper of the Grove Silence. Now, Ancient Watcher can't attack is a stipulation on the card, and Silence Effects removes all these stipulations. So, when we use our Keeper of the Grove on our Ancient Watcher, we get a 2-mana 4/5. So you've innervated a Chillwind Yeti at the expense of a Silence, but you still get 6 power on board. I'd say that's pretty good. We have Blood Mage in here to generally make all of our spells more powerful. It's very refreshing to take out a Frothing Berserker with just a Wrath, or to completely wipe a board with a swipe. The 2 damage to all other creatures is really irrelevant. It turns your swipe into a better Starfall. Now, you'll notice that we are playing a big game hunter. Right now, we're not sure how much Warlock will move out of the metagame, and it's a very tough matchup. I would say it's the worst matchup, but even so, it's probably only 40-60 or 45-55. Just because in general, if they can land a lot of Molten Giants or Mountain Giants against you, you have trouble getting rid of that 8 toughness creature. But the Big Game Hunter shores up that matchup a lot and makes it a lot easier to just take over tempo and remove their creature from play and have a 4/2 attacker, as well as being an aggressive drop because it's a 3-mana 4/2. That means that you'll be able to race Hunter decks or other aggro decks. As long as you can protect your Big Game Hunter, you can usually close out the game before they can. So you'll see that we're playing the classic Chillwind Yeti combo. with our full suite of defenders. We have full set of Azure Drakes, Druid of the Claws. This is very, very standard for an Ancient Watcher Druid deck, and that's exactly how the deck should be. There's a lot of flex positions in the deck where you can cut a certain amount of defenders or a certain amount of Azure Drakes for other cards, but this is typically the standard list you should expect. So when you're playing against Ancient Watcher Druid, unless you see something really off the wall and you want to keep track of their cards, you should be looking at a list something like this. Now, we do have a couple of changes towards the end game of the deck. So you'll notice we have no Rag. Ragnaros and Cenarius are excellent cards in their own right. But when you're playing against a very aggressive metagame, you don't really want something like an 8-drop or a 9-drop clogging your hand in the early turns of the game. Now, Black Knight itself isn't particularly effective against aggro, as it's a 6-mana 4/5, and they don't typically play many taunts, but against the more controlling decks, it's an excellent card as it gets rid of, Druid of the Claws, taunted up giants, gets rid of Ancient Watchers against you. It really gets rid of everything. And in Control Hunter, it gets rid of any taunted creature that they might play. And it also gets rid of Shield Masters that you expect your opponents to be having in to beat all these aggressive decks as well. Now, this card is particularly effective, and I'll show you why. We have a Black Knight situation. My opponent played their Druid of the Claw, thinking that they were in control of the game because it would, get rid of my Azure Drake for free, and I was able to play my Black Knight. Now, Jam certainly went hams in this game. That play probably won me the game. It gave me enough tempo to take over the game, as it gave me a free 4/5 and destroyed his 4/6. That is as sweet as it gets. So, you'll be playing this package alongside your Ancients of Lore for card draw or health gain. These are also particularly great with Innervate, as you can often cheat them out on turn 5 and play a 5/5 that gains 5 life versus aggressive decks is just fine by me. Or drawing 2 cards is extremely good versus your more controlling matchups, as you'll be able to just grind them out of the game. Alright, so we've been talking about flex positions, but we need to know what positions are really, really flexible. These positions are probably your Ancient Watcher, your Blood Mage, your Sun Fury Protector, Azure Drake, as it doesn't trade well with aggressive decks since it's just a 4/4 for 5. Yes, it draws you a card, but if they can get rid of it really easily, that's not really a card you want to be playing. And we do have the Force of Nature package, but I think it's pretty standardized in these decks, and you can't really get rid of them just because that endgame burst is so powerful. So it really has earned a place, and I think it's solidified itself in the deck, and it can't really be removed. Alright, let's look at some variants that we've made, just to give you guys some ideas as you change the deck yourself. So in this anti-aggro build, we've actually taken out our Black Knight, as it's an extremely clunky card, and it doesn't really do much in this matchup, and put in its place a Sunwalker. Sunwalker is supremely underrated. Against aggressive decks, it's usually a 2-for-1, sometimes a 3-for-1, and it can just stall out the board long enough for you to apply enough pressure to take them out. We've cut an Azure Drake. As I was saying before, the 4 toughness really is a liability versus these aggressive decks. You can't just play an Azure Drake onto a board with two 3/2s and expect it to survive. Maybe it's a Flame Imp and they have a Mortal Coil. It doesn't really take much tempo away from them. In fact, it just destroys you as they spend 2 mana to get rid of your 5-mana creature. So that's a big problem. You also notice that we've added a Mark of the Wild to the deck in place of a Big Game Hunter. Mark of the Wild is great as it allows us to exploit our Ancient Watcher package, and it's just so powerful. So what we did was we cut our Azure Drake, our Black Knight, and our Big Game Hunter to add in an Earthen Ring Farseer, a Mark of the Wild, and a Sunwalker. Now, Earthen Ring Farseer is a highly underrated card. It allows your creatures to be extremely durable. Now, you say, how can it allow my creatures to be extremely durable? It's just a 3/3 that gives me 3 health. Well, that's the misconception with it. Not always should you be healing yourself. Now, if you, let's say, have an Ancient Watcher and it's taunted and it's taken a hit and it's a 4-1, you can throw down your Earthen Ring Farseer and bring it back to a 4-4. Now you have another wall that they have to get past. It's as if you just played a second Ancient Watcher, and you've increased your board advantage by playing a 3-power creature. That just makes the game much harder for them to take over. You'll notice that we still play our Force of Nature Savage Roar package in this deck, and that's because we really don't want to be a dog to control. And the more controlling decks, they really can't handle this one-turn kill combo. Now, you just have to set it up by gradually bringing your opponent to 14 life, but it really is such a powerful combo that it stays in the deck even when we're trying to build against aggressive decks. Cairn is another card that's just so important in the deck that we can't really see removing it. You know, it's tempting to take it out for a second Sunwalker. That might be correct, but I just hate to relinquish all the power that I have against controlling decks and remove all these cards. It's still a reasonable threat, still comes out on turn 6. You can innervate it on turn 4 and play a Mark of the Wild on it. It's extremely powerful as a 6-7 wall. Alright, so let's look at a more controlling variant of the deck. Now with this controlling variant, we've cut a lot of the Ancient Watcher package. You'll notice that one Ancient Watcher is gone, one Sun Fury Protector is gone, and one Defender of Argus is gone. So the main reason we do this is because we're not really trying to disrupt their early game plan. You know, we do have the Keeper of the Grove combo with Ancient Watcher to have a 4/5 for 2 mana, but even then we really want to save our Keepers for their legendary creatures, their Cairns, their Rags, the hard cards to deal with. And what we've added in place of this are our own sustainable threats in Cenarius, a Faceless Manipulator, and an Ancient of War. So, Ancient of War, people are saying, whoa, what is this, a throwback to Season 2? Maybe it is. Ancient of War is just such a durable threat against, you know, so many decks. There's very Silver Needle answers to this. So they're really looking for specific cards. Warriors need their Executes against Ancient of War. Warlocks need their Siphon Souls. And outside of that, there's not much else that really deals with Ancient of War well. Hex. So those are three cards that they're going to have 2 of in their decks. And they need to take out your Ancient of War. And if they don't, you have the ability to Faceless Manipulator and gain a second. So it's just a brick wall for them. And even if it's Silence, it's a 5/5 for 7 mana. So it's still a very reasonable threat. And it just progresses your board state in such a way that it's extremely threatening to your opponent. They need to deal with it right away. This deck is extremely powerful. We've cut back on our aggro package, but even still, you still have your Wraths, your Swipes, all these critical cards versus aggressive decks, and we've bolstered our control matchup in such a way that they're going to have a hard time dealing with us. Now, you might ask, why Cenarius over Ragnaros, right? Ragnaros is an excellent card, but lately, everyone's been playing Big Game Hunters. And the thing that we know about Big Game Hunter is that it's terrible to have your Ragnaros that you spent 8 mana and a whole turn casting taken away by a BGH. So that's one of the primary reasons we're doing it. And also, it's an excellent card when you have board equity, 2 or 3 creatures in play, to just buff all your creatures and do an unexpectedly large amount of damage. Maybe clear their board and still have a 5/8 left over. It's just a very powerful card in its own right. This leaves you a little more susceptible to cards like Brawl, but we're willing to take that risk for the upside. I think it's a very powerful card, even at 9 mana. We're going to see that Black Knight is still in the deck. It's extremely powerful, durable threat, and it just does so many 1-for-nones. You're just taking out so many taunt creatures that you know that they're all playing, and it's just such a good card for you to have in the deck. I can't tell you, I must have won 16 games straight, and probably 5 or 6 of them were off Black Knight alone. The tempo that it gives you, that it generates, is just so astronomically high. You'll notice that we didn't go to 2 BGHs, because we're not really sure how much Warlock and how large the creatures are going to be in the new metagame. It really skews itself and tends itself for more aggressive metas when seasons restart, because they're the easiest to rank with, they're the fastest to rank with. So cards like BGH, while they do have a home as a 1-of in these decks, I really don't think you should be playing 2 at the moment. Maybe as a week or 2 passes and we see a metagame develop and we figure out how much control exists, then you can bring in a second copy over another card, maybe completely cut your Ancient Watcher package. It's completely feasible. But as it stands, you don't really need that many Big Game Hunters at the beginning of a season. So let's talk about cards to think about. We have Nourish, Rag, Sylvanas. There's still so many cards in this deck that we can add. You know, Druid decks are the most flexible decks. It depends how. It all depends at the speed of the metagame and how many decks you're facing that say, let's say, play difficult to deal with legendary threats. I know if I'm playing against a lot of warrior and they're landing Ysseras against me, they're landing Alexstrasas, they're landing Groms, you might want to play Sylvanas just to take their creatures. You know, that's such a powerful threat for you, and they often have hard times dealing with their own legends. And their decks are very threat light, so when you take and are easy to or you easily deal with their threats, then it becomes very difficult for them to get back into the game. Now with aggro, we have cards such as Claw and Starfall and Healing Touch. You know, a lot of people forget about Healing Touch, but the 8 life that you gain is just astronomically ridiculous. People have such a hard time dealing 30 damage to you with an aggressive deck because they really have a range to the amount of damage they can deal. Maybe over the course of a game they'll deal 35 damage to you, and Healing Touch just puts you out of range of anything they could do. We have Argent Commander. Maybe if you want to close out the game a little faster and Sunwalker isn't doing it for you, you can swap Sunwalkers out for Argent Commanders, you can swap Karn out for an Argent Commander, and really bring the fight to them and play aggressively. Just all these cards in tandem, Shield Masters, they're really powerful, potent threats against aggressive decks. And if you're really having trouble with them, these are the cards you want to bring in favor of your Azure Drakes, in favor of your very control-oriented cards that aren't particularly effective in that matchup. So, what we've really seen here is the ability of Druid decks to just take over the game. We understand that Druid itself really doesn't have a bad matchup. It's a really powerful deck. Now, you won't be skewed in favor in any real matchup as well because everybody has a fair shot. That means that if you just play well, you play tight, you keep track of the removal that they've used, you can take over games and you can push your edge because you have such powerful cards. You know, Ancient of Lore just brings you back into any game. You can close out any game with Force of Nature and Savage Roar. The deck is built to really drive itself against anything, and it's such a versatile deck that I extremely recommend it in a meta that we don't really know what we're going to see, how many aggressive decks, how many hunters. It's just a very solid threat. Alright guys, thank you so much. I applaud you if you made it this far in the video. I always appreciate it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's great. If you follow me at Eric Kreiter on Twitter or twitch.tv/PolishKing_. Thank you so much and good luck on the fields of battle. I'll see you at Legend with those sweet Legend card backs.